Hello everyone, today we're looking at Elizabeth's advisors in terms of her royal court and her Privy Council, with the objective of looking at what the role of the royal court and Privy Council even were. Your starter today is to explain the personality of Elizabeth. So once you have your title, LO, and starter written down, you can go ahead and resume playing this video and we'll look at taking up the starter together. So the personality of Elizabeth, well, we know a fair bit about her. We know that she was very well educated. She spoke Greek, Latin, French, Italian, and English. She was very good at sewing and archery. She studied theology. She would spit and swear. She was quite quick-tempered when she was angry. She nearly died of smallpox, and this led to her kind of obsessive use of makeup. And she cared a lot about her appearance. She spent a lot of money on clothing and makeup, something that she was criticized for quite often. So please just make sure that we know those kind of basic facts about her personality before we proceed. So there are a fair amount of key terms for us to complete today. We've got ladies in waiting, courtiers, patronage, Puritan, smallpox, and succession. If you'd like to have a go at just matching up some of those in your head, see if you can figure any of them out. Once you've done that, resume playing the video and we'll make sure we get them all down correctly in our note. So let's have a look. So ladies in waiting. This is a lady who was the queen's attendant, and the ladies in waiting had loads of different jobs. One of them was actually helping the queen to get dressed. Now, queens would wear something called a corset, which was a very tight-fitting garment they wear underneath their dresses. It would pinch at the waist to make their waist very narrow, which was quite fashionable at the time. And you would need usually one or two others to actually tie that corset up for you nice and tightly. Courtiers. This is anyone who attends the royal court. Think of the royal court as Elizabeth's friends, the people that she chooses to hang out with. Patronage is any kind of a special favor. This is given from the queen to maintain loyalty. So if the queen asks you to make sure you support her, perhaps in a law or bill that she wants to pass, she might offer you some land or a royal title to keep supporting her. A Puritan is an extreme and strict version of being a Protestant. Puritans didn't really do a whole lot by the way of fun. Their lives were mainly dedicated to religion. Smallpox, an infectious disease, boils and rashes on the skin. This is what Elizabeth had when she was younger and left her with some minor scarring on her skin. And succession, this is the right by which someone comes into office, the next king or queen. We know that that is called the divine right of kings and queens, where God essentially chooses who is going to succeed the previous monarch. So please do pause the video again and make sure you're getting these written down correctly. Now, the royal court was the center of all political power. Royal courtiers, they assisted Elizabeth in monitoring the Privy Council and Parliament and just kind of checking up and making sure everyone was doing their job in government. Patronage allowed Elizabeth to maintain and earn support from her courtiers. If she wanted them to support her in a particular bill or law, she might offer them a royal title or some land or even some money to kind of maintain support for her. But Elizabeth would often play favorites in her royal court. These were known as factions, and these rivalries would soon develop between different courtiers. If we have a look at the image on the right-hand side, we can see this is Henry VIII and his royal court. And we can look and see who was in his court in this image. And of course, we can see Edward on the left-hand side, and we can see Mary on the right. Now, going off of what we talked about with factions, so patronage caused these splits or factions to develop. Great way to remember factions is remember the word fraction. A fraction is when you take something and split it. That's the same as a faction. It's a split in the royal court. Elizabeth would often play one faction against another to get what she wanted. If one of the factions wouldn't play ball with her, she could use her ultimate power to simply dismiss them or to sack them from the royal court. And this meant courtiers always wanted to keep the approval of the queen. And being a member of the royal court wasn't a guaranteed job. You could get kicked out of the royal court very easily. So you had to make sure that you were playing this game of politics with the queen, doing what she wanted to make sure that you maintained her approval. So what was it like to be a member of the royal court? For copyright purposes, we can't actually show you this video, but we do have a link to it in the description down below. So please do go ahead and click that link. It's about a 5-minute video that will show you what it would be like if you were to host an event such as a royal progress or to be a member of the royal court. When you're finished watching that clip, you can come back to this video lesson. So now let's take a look at the Privy Council. They're kind of the opposite of the royal court. They're chosen by the Queen to advise her. They're not chosen to hang out and have fun with. They're simply chosen to offer her advice and to help her rule. Now, Elizabeth doesn't ever have to listen to the Privy Council. She doesn't need their advice, but she appoints them to be able to gain a better perspective before she makes specific decisions. If you have a look at the image on the right-hand side, you can see that there are privy councillors, and yes, they all look quite the same, but upon closer inspection, we can see that they're actually of different ages. So we have some who are quite a lot older, and we have some who are quite a bit younger. Now, something we can't see are their religions. Now, in the Privy Council, there would be members of the Protestant faith, the Catholic faith, and the Puritan faith. And Elizabeth surrounded herself with people of all ages and all beliefs to try and balance her decisions. And this is possibly one of the reasons why she was such a long-serving monarch. This is because any law that she passed or any rule that she put into place, she had a wealth of different perspectives on before she went through with her decision. So now we're going to go ahead and meet the members of Elizabeth's Privy Council. Her Privy Council changed over time, but we're going to look at the 6 most important councillors, and some of which were the longest serving as well. So please do make sure you're writing down detailed notes about each councillor. It would be very wise to know their religion and what role they served on the council.
William Cecil. Elizabeth appointed Cecil as the Secretary of State in 1558. He was her most important minister and guided her wisely for 40 years. In 1571, he received the title Lord Burghley. Cecil was a moderate Protestant and was concerned about the threat of English Catholics. Whilst he shared her caution as he did not want to see England embroiled in expensive foreign wars, he was very much his own man. He was clear on the fact that he was an advisor to the Queen, and as such he would challenge her by using Parliament and her courtiers to encourage her to change her mind about various issues. After the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots in 1587, Elizabeth refused to see Cecil. She was angry with him and blamed him. Sir Francis Walsingham was in charge of Elizabeth's Secret Service and advised on foreign affairs. Walsingham, like Cecil, was also worried about the Catholic threat and advised Elizabeth. Walsingham was a cold and calculating man, and whilst Elizabeth admired his straight-talking nature, she could be angered by him. In the 1580s, when Walsingham wanted to repress the Catholics, she was so angry she threw her shoe at him. In 1586, he uncovered the plot that led to Mary, Queen of Scots' execution. When Walsingham died, Cecil took back the role of Secretary of State.
So the next 2 councillors that we're going to look at is Robert Dudley and Sir Christopher Hatton. Let's start off with Robert Dudley. So he is also known as the Earl of Leicester. He was a trusted advisor until he died in 1588. There were some rumors around that he and Elizabeth were romantically involved, but none of this was ever proven. What we do know about him is he was a Puritan. He did not get along with William Cecil at all, often giving rival advice to the Queen just to try to get even with Cecil. Now, looking at Christopher Hatton, he was a moderate Protestant. He was appointed as Lord Chancellor in 1587, and he was responsible for keeping an eye on Parliament, as well as organizing all of Elizabeth's royal progresses. And our last 2 Privy Councillors we'll be focusing on is Robert Devereux. Now, he was the 2nd Earl of Essex. He came from a very, very wealthy family, and he enjoyed the Queen's favour until the 1590s. But he and her, they didn't really see eye to eye, and they often ended their conversations as arguments. He was involved in a plot to actually remove some of the Queen's councillors, leading to his rebellion in 1601. and which he was actually executed for. Now, Robert Cecil, he is the youngest son of William Cecil, so Elizabeth's longest serving Privy Councillor. Robert gained access to the Queen through the influence of his father. He wasn't particularly gifted as a child in any way, but he did spend time around the Queen and the royal court and soon gained favor in that respect. He was raised as a Protestant by his father. When Walsingham died in 1590, Robert Cecil took over duties as spy master and as foreign secretary, and in 1602 he became responsible for putting a plan into place for the succession of Elizabeth. By 1602, Elizabeth didn't have any children, and it was really unclear who would be the next king or queen of England. And he helped put a plan into place that would get James VI of Scotland to assume the role of king after his death and becoming the King James I of England. Now, one of the challenges that we will face in the Elizabethan unit are sources, because they're going to be written in Old English. That's kind of like the type of language that William Shakespeare would write in. So we're going to take a look at source G, which is below. It gives us a very great insight as to how Elizabeth chose to rule. And your task now is to rewrite the source in modern English, so the way that we would say it. So this is a comment of Elizabeth's method of ruling made in the 1630s by Sir Robert Naunton. He was actually a member of the Queen's Court, so he was there at the time and saw how she ruled. And here's what he said. He said, "She ruled much by factions and parties, which she made, upheld, and weakened as her own great judgment advised." Your job now is to pause the video and try to rewrite Naunton's quote in your own words. What was he trying to say? And you might find that when you rewrite this, it's slightly longer or shorter, but the message should remain the same. So pause the video now, have a go at writing this out, and when you think you've got a response, go ahead and hit play and we'll look at one together. So looking at rewriting Naunton's source, he said, "She ruled much by factions and parties, which she made, upheld, and weakened as her own great judgment advised." We could say something along the lines of this. Elizabeth ruled by creating different groups known as factions in her royal court. She would play these factions off one another to get what she wanted. She would make each faction stronger or weaker as she pleased, and this was usually through her use of patronage. If you didn't have that down, please go ahead and use the translation on the right-hand side, or simply use information in that to improve the one that you already wrote. And your final task for the lesson today is to imagine the year is 1580 and you work for Elizabeth's government. You've assigned to create a document which will explain the differences between the royal court and Privy Council. Elizabeth has reminded you that most people can only read simple sentences. So your job now is to create a document of your choice. Pictures would probably be a better option in this case to help explain the differences between the royal court and the Privy Council.